Hey there, I'm going to talk about the Mercury retrograde cycle in Scorpio that's coming up on November 24th. It's going to go retrograde in Scorpio, and then it's going to be retrograde until December 13th when it goes direct again. And so this Mercury, when it goes retrograde, it's actually closer to the Earth at that time when it's retrograde. And retrograde is a source of strength, one of the sources of strength for that reason, because the planet is closer to the Earth. And of course, when the planet's closer to the Earth, its energy is much more prominent in our consciousness. But what happens is it appears to be moving backwards. So what this means is that, our life on Earth is moving forward all the time, and the things that the planet rules and all like that is moving forward relative to the way we're moving. When it moves backwards, though, those things appear to move backwards in our consciousness, which means that, I should say that the function of the planet begins to back up. And rather than being externally strong and confident, it becomes externally sort of interrupted, but that creates an internal awareness. So the classic, well, is it good or bad? Vedic says it's bad, or Vedic says it's good, Western says it's bad, and people want this like simple explanation. It's actually both, or it's neither, probably is a better way to put it. It creates difficulties in things like, as we all know, communication, don't sign contracts. We've all heard these things. This is perhaps possible, but not necessarily. I've signed contracts with Mercury retrograde. I've released my book with Mercury retrograde. All these things have been successful. You don't have to put your life on hold with Mercury retrograde or any one factor. There's always auspicious, what are called muhurtas, or moments, all the time, no matter what's happening with one particular thing. But you want to be aware, like if you enter into agreements, especially that maybe others aren't as cognizant of the details, you want to pay attention to the details because it might be easy to overlook some important ones, and others may be not paying so much attention, so they might be miscommunicating, and so to just be aware of that. But what happens is these external interruptions create that internal connection. So what this means is that, let's say, I like to use the example, like if you come home and you go to open your door and you go to put the key in the lock, if the lock is fine, the key goes in, you open the door, and there's no problem. You don't even look at the key, you don't even look at the lock, you just... But as soon as there's a problem, let's say with the key, or it doesn't go in the lock, then you take it out, you look at it really closely, you examine it. This is kind of like retrograde, because normally things just kind of happen, with Mercury or with anything else, and we're just used to them flowing with a certain ease. When it goes retrograde, it tends to back up and create an interruption, which is sort of like an interruption with when you're putting the key in the lock. Rather than it just being a mechanical thing, you stop and you have to pay attention to it. So again, Mercury not only rules speech and contracts and details. This is the thing, details. Speech, good speech is in the details, and the ability to be flexible and the ability to not get passionate and get heated and lose your head when things don't go your way. And when Mercury's retrograde, those things maybe become more hard to, those duties become harder to perform with skill. What happens is we tend to doubt. Like when it goes retrograde, it actually tends to reverse what was happening, and it becomes more internal. We doubt our function. So it's in Scorpio. So Mercury's been in Scorpio for a couple weeks, and so there's a lot of willful, emotional, even potentially vindictive, or if not vindictive, like just confusing, over-emotional speech, communication, interaction. Mercury and Venus have both been in Scorpio, so there's been a lot of potential for things to like blow up and for our judgments to be off and for us to really get kind of paranoid and blow things out of proportion, especially around romantic things and getting triggered and obsessed, and all kinds of those potentials have been pretty high since Mercury and Venus have been in Scorpio for the last couple weeks. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was actually like right around the end of October. And so these things have been pretty ripe for the last few weeks as it stands. And so Mercury going retrograde may give us a real potential to correct some of that miscommunication, put things in a better light, and as an example. Now, of course, the benefit of having it being retrograde and backing up in our consciousness is it becomes a real internal factor. We become aware of its use a lot more, rather than it being something that we just sort of take for granted and sort of say, well, but they did that to me, so blah, blah. And like our discrimination, we start to doubt it, and we're like, well, wait a minute, maybe that was me. Maybe I didn't communicate that very well, or maybe I made a mistake there. And, so we might actually apologize, or we might actually do something like that. For new things, like I said, you want to be careful and reflect on the details before you want to make sure everything is right, and you definitely can. One of the really good things about Mercury retrograde is it's good for things like writing and internal qualities of Mercury, editing, reflecting upon what needs to be improved, what can be improved. And also, Mercury in Scorpio is also good for things like writing. It's a very good placement for writing and the imagination. So these could be sources of strength and benefit. The planet also, when it's retrograde, it creates interruptions based on the houses that it rules, like in someone's natal chart. Like if it's a natal chart, it doesn't necessarily, it actually strengthens the planet as what's called a karaka, which means as an indicator. So actually when the planet is retrograde, the person can have a real intimate relationship with that thing and actually have a lot of pure understanding of what it does because of this retrograde motion. But the things that it rules externally as a karaka, which means, like I said, with Mercury and speech and details, and also as a house ruler, like if it's, let's say for Cancer, Mercury rules the 3rd and 12th house. So things like courage and siblings and retreats and meditation, these kinds of things, if Mercury's retrograde for Cancer, can get backed up because that's what Mercury actually rules as a house ruler. The houses are the things that actually manifest in our life, and like I said, our life is moving forward, and the planets rule these tangible things. So when the planet is retrograde, the houses that it rules tend to back up also because they become confused in our mind as well. So you'll see it in a natal chart for sure, but whatever houses Mercury rules for you, like let's say you're Cancer, then Mercury rules the 3rd and 12th house. So when Mercury cycles or when Mercury retrograde, you might have confusion with things like siblings or like meditation. You might suddenly start like just getting into big like escapist mode and things like that. So watch for those things. But Mercury retrograde from November 24th until December 13th is a time for you to reflect upon the details, your speech, communication. Make sure that the things you have been communicating are not excessively emotional and off and obsessive and all that stuff. And if they have been, you can maybe clean that up a little bit or reflect upon that more and, bring more, consciousness into those areas of life. And beyond that, that internal quality of Mercury to really bring great amounts of discrimination and, to be able to see the truth rather than all of the emotion and passion. Mercury is what's called a neutral planet, which means it's not masculine or feminine, it's not charged, it's very neutral. It goes into a situation, and the faculty of Mercury is to keep you neutral and keep you even, not have you excited and optimistic, not have you disappointed or anything like that, but to see what's there and to make the adjustment that's necessary, to see it clearly with detachment and make the adjustment that's necessary. These things could be very powerful when Mercury's retrograde between November 24th and December 13th. But it's in Scorpio, very emotional, so watch the emotions. Try to not get too sucked up in that sort of drama and passion.